Welcome to the Uncomfortable Podcast with Jeffrey Gabriel, founder, CEO of Saw.com, where I interview entrepreneurs and business people who have achieved the extraordinary, but didn't do it without some adversity, failure, sweat, and some serious heartburn along the way. How many people do you know that left a Fortune 500 job to build a business that amassed over 1 million subscribers, sold it, then bought it back, and then sold it again? Well, that person today is Michael Cyger, and he's our guest. He's also built a magazine, a job board, an app agency, Domain Academy, if you're new to the domain space and got some education, which he sold to GoDaddy, and many other businesses. So stay tuned for a great episode. And if you get anything out of this, please head over to Apple, Spotify, or iHeartRadio to leave us a review and shoot us some unfettered feedback to buzz@saw.com. Today we have Michael Cyger, who is a serial entrepreneur that's similar to many. Decided to roll the dice and make the big decision to go out on your own and never look back. But despite what many assume has only been a road to success, Mike has also faced some failure, betrayal, and some ups and downs. And beginning his career working at GE Capital and Citigroup, what year was that?
I started working at GE Power Systems in 1992.
1992.
I know.
So in 1990, yeah, you are. I was 12. So in 1992, you're working in the corporate world. You did that for about 10 years, and then working at Citigroup. And while you were there, which are two really prestigious jobs in those companies, when did it become where you're saying to yourself, I really love the money. I really love, the prestige that comes with working at these companies, but I want to do my own thing. When did that start picking at you?
I worked at GE Power Systems for about 5 years. Then when GE Capital was taking off, they were making money hand over fist. And I'm like, that looks like it's a fun job. They get to do a lot of off-site type gigs. I'm going to go over to GE Capital. Went to GE Capital. Then I spent about another 4 years or so. Then the .com boom was taken off. I went to Citigroup to start their online-only banking, help start up their online-only banking area. And then when the .com bust happened, I came back to GE Capital for another couple of years. And so, it was a wild ride. It was important that I didn't burn any bridges when I was leaving GE and coming back to GE Capital. You always want to leave on good terms with a clear discussion with everybody that you're working with. But it became clear that even at Citigroup and other corporations, everybody will attest to this in large Fortune 500 companies, that you can do the best work possible in the smartest way possible, working with all of the people in the organization. But sometimes the leaders of the organization are always going to say, let's do it a different way, or we're going to shut that down, or we didn't pick the right strategy to begin with. So I'm sorry you executed well, but we're going a different way. And that's really frustrating. So after, years of ups and downs inside of corporate America, I decided that I wanted to try my own way and see if I could do it myself.
Mm-hmm. And then after you resigned, were you kind of like, holy shit, I just did it. There goes the consistent paycheck, right?
Yes, there was that holy shit moment, but I tried to temper it. So when I left Citigroup, I was doing this process improvement methodology called Six Sigma. I had learned it at GE Capital, and I was a green belt, master black belt in a couple of roles there. Then I went to Citigroup and I was doing operational excellence there. And then I saw all of these, these .coms, like pets.com getting $147 million and all these crazy ideas. And I'm like, those people aren't smarter than me. Why don't I try something like that? So when I left Citigroup, I took 2 weeks off before starting back at GE Capital Corporate. And I decided to start up my own website called isixsigma.com. I would have named it e6sigma.com, but the E Six Sigma was taken. So I had to go I. And I don't know if you remember at that time in 2000, everything was either E or I. And so now there's like nothing named E or I that we visit on a regular basis.
No.
And so I started it up, built the technology, I coded it myself, and it was terrible, duct taped together with bubble gum, but it was up and running. And then I went back to GE Capital. I told them that I have this business running on the side. It's not going to conflict with anything I do. And I worked for 2 years at GE Capital while I worked on the website in the evenings and on the weekends, and continued to grow it. And I saw, as I wrote good content and as I published on a regular basis every single week, whether I was sick or not, whether I was traveling or not, whatever, I published an article, put it out in our newsletter. There was no social media at the time. Otherwise, I would have promoted it on social media. And over time, it just kept growing and growing and growing. Traffic, and then advertisers would see it, and I would send out some cold emails to people saying, hey, have you seen Six Sigma? Our traffic is growing. We had a discussion forum. I love to have controversy like we've seen in the domain name industry on some of the forums as well, because it brought more eyeballs to the website that then could see the advertisers. And so after 2 years of running Six Sigma on the side, it had the revenue that I had booked going forward for the upcoming year equaled my salary at GE. So I really wasn't taking this enormous leap, although it was a big leap. If I left GE Capital for the second time, I'm not going to come back and get another job at GE Capital.
No, they're done with you.
Yeah. So it was a big leap. I was very worried. My wife still had her job. She was at GE Capital as well. But she was also 8 months pregnant with our first child, who was, due. So I knew we had insurance. I knew she was going to get, her paycheck while she was on maternity leave for part of it. But I decided to with a guaranteed, of course, advertisers could pull out of a contract, but it was a non-cancelable contracts that I had for the upcoming year. And I thought if I just focused on it, I think I could grow it. And I took the leap of faith, and it worked out. Once I focused 100% on Six Sigma, it grew even faster. We could put out more content. I could work with more people. I could do more outbound advertising, advertising sales myself, and it really grew from there.
So you had a kid on the way. How old were you when you did this? When you kind of finally cut the cord?
I was old in terms of entrepreneurs starting up companies. 2000, I was 30 years old.
Okay. So you were 30 years old in 2000. You got Six Sigma going. At its peak, you served over 600,000 readers. You had a print magazine, 25,000 subscribers.
Correct.
Part of that, you also had doing conferences, a job board, which was a job board, and a recruitment firm, all under this package. So
all under the Six Sigma umbrella, correct.
Okay, so and people listening, can you please tell us exactly what Six Sigma is? Because
yeah, in the 80s, Motorola had pagers. You remember those pagers that you used to wear on your belt? You don't, but you probably have seen.
I know what they are. I never had one, but yeah, they were popular.
They would roll off the line, and a lot of them were defective. And so they had to do a lot of rework on those pagers. And one of the engineers said, if we could just fix the process such that, 99.99999% of them rolling off the conveyor belt at the end just worked. So we never had to test them before we sent them out. We could save a lot of money. And that was the inception for Six Sigma, producing a process that had 6 standard deviations in between spec limits such that you could rely on high enough quality of the process so that you never had to do rework, so that you didn't have errors, so that you didn't have customer perceivable defects to your process. And I learned about it at GE Power Systems. I implemented it at GE Capital for transactional processes. I went to Citigroup and we did online type work with respect to Six Sigma. So it's very statistical. It's basically just improving processes and making them as perfect as possible with, a trade-off of, the cost to do so. And I just really became enamored with this process and wanted to share what I had learned about it, implementing it at multiple different companies.
Have you implemented this in any of the domain investing you've been doing, or domain, or like DN Academy at all, or you just kind of have it
Yeah,
ingrained in you?
most people that know my investing style know that I don't have a lot of domain names. So
Yeah.
I don't have a large data set by which to try and implement. But the things that underpin Six Sigma is database decision making. And the thing that I've always tried to do at Domain Sherpa in asking people information about their success and then translating that into DN Academy, the online learning course that I had for domain name investing, is I wanted to boil down this amorphous feeling of successful domain name investing that so many of the greats have had that we know in domain name investing, and really boil it down to what is it about the characteristics of domain names that allow us to select better domain names. If given the opportunity between two domain names, how do we choose which one is the better one? Which one is going to have more opportunities for sale in the future? Which one is going to allow a company to, to change their direction if they need to without throwing away their investment? Which one is going to, continue to rise in value over time or be, watered down by other TLDs that might come out in the future?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's really what I tried to focus on, is bringing that Six Sigma mentality, the database decision making, and making domain name investing less of an art and more of a science. I don't think it's 100% science, but I think it could be, using data makes you more confident in your decision making.
Yeah. I think what I found in the domain business is that, especially when you teach someone who's brand new in it, is that you'll say, for example, I'll say someone like, the word domains with the word the in it aren't as valuable as those without. And then someone will go, well, what about thebible.com? And you're like, oh shit. There's an exception to every rule. And the moment you tell someone a rule, they always find the exception, right? And it's like, you're right. In science, a certain scientific method will get you and boil it down and get rid of all the chaff so you can focus on being able to make the right decision for what is available to you. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
But it does come down to, in the end, you and I can look at names all we want and have our certain feelings, but the data usually correlates with our feelings, most of the time. Like, look, there's obvious ones, search volume, CPC is tied to very valuable names. And then the number of extensions the domain is registered in are three like biggies that, that you can look at are consistent. There's always exceptions to the rule, right?
Right. Yeah, there's more people that want to read the Bible, I'm sure, in the world, that want to visit the website, theexchange.com. But I'd probably put my money into the exchange because you and I know that financial institutions are the ones that have the money. There are always startups coming in finance and the internet and blockchain and different technologies are allowing exchanges, whether they're financial or property related or whatever. And so, there are often exceptions, but I think it's important to go to first principles and understand what the rules are so that people have a better understanding of how to make better decisions. And then life experiences cannot be minimized, right? There are always exceptions, and it's the strong investor that can realize this is an exception that I'm willing to put my money down on and take a risky bet on.
I agree.
Payoff.
So let's talk about some more risk while we're on the subject of risk. So you're doing this for about 8 years, 9 years, and then there's a knock on the door and a company says, we want to buy your business. And and were you shopping your business, or did someone come and say, we're interested in your business?
Yeah, I decided to shop it. We were in business for about 7 years. Revenue kept growing significantly every single year. Our net income was continuing to grow in proportion to it. We had like a fantastic business. Internet publishing is one of the best businesses in the world because you need a strong, small, capable workforce, and then you can leverage that exponentially on the web for, if people are interested in that topic, of course. And so the business just kept growing and growing, and I saw it as an opportunity to take some money off the table at that point. So about 5 years in, I had joined this organization called American Business Media. I always felt like I was I had imposter syndrome as a business publisher. Like, who am I? I'm just an engineer who got a job at GE Power Systems and then lucked into GE Capital and had this unique skill set that looked at data differently than most people in financial services. And then I started this online website. I'm like, I'm not a publisher. I'm an engineer. I am really not that good at writing. Some people may argue, well, Mike, you published, Domain Sherpa transcripts, you had DN Academy, whatever else. But like, my wife's a really good editor, and I can put down enough information on the paper, and then she can do a great job editing it. So it makes me look like a hero. But really, like 50% of my accomplishments are due to my wife and us being able to work together. And so I wanted to figure out how to become a real B2B, business to business publisher, because that's what we were. Most of our, we served about 70% of the Fortune 100 companies. They subscribed to our newsletters. They bought our magazines. They used our recruiting service to find people. And I wanted to figure out how to actually run a real B2B media company. So I joined American Business Media. I went to their conferences, felt like a total outsider because all these, older guys who had been in media business for their whole career sat around the tables. It's much like people showing up for domain name conferences that don't know anybody. Everybody seems like everybody else is an insider. That's the way I felt like when I joined American Business Media. But I met some people. I looked for younger people in the crowd because I was, relatively younger. I chatted with them. I met one broker there who helped me understand valuations of business media. We talked about, the growth of the business. So I basically figured out how I could set up my business to get it ready for sale in a couple of years. And that's what I did. I decided that we were at a point where it could be life-changing money if we sold the company. We hired a broker representing us. We prepared the business for sale. We offered it up, offering memorandum. We got letters of intent. We selected one. We went into due diligence, and they came out to Seattle. They rented out a conference room in a hotel. We had multiple days meeting with the team. And then in the 11th hour, as we were going over the contract, they decided to kill the deal. And I couldn't believe it, because by this point, Jeff, we're already thinking like, do we want to buy a new house? Where are we going to vacation? Like, what's life going to be like after we get this life-changing sale? And I was so deflated. I remember I was like probably clinically depressed for at least a month after the sale. Like, I didn't want to do any work. And we hadn't told any of the staff in the business because deals fall through all the time, as you know, as a broker. And so I was just completely deflated. It took me a month to get over it. I got back into the business, started working. And then, 6 months after that, I decided, okay, I know why they decided to walk away. Our books weren't as clean as they should have been. We weren't set up to hand over the business so that it was a business that they felt they could run without me. And those are all things that can be fixed. So we changed our business books to accrual from cash accounting. I hired a publisher to take over the running of the business in B2B, terminology. A publisher is the one, like the CEO that runs the day-to-day operations and budget. And we had the business ready to offer again to the market, about a year and a half later. All set up so that I could just walk away.
So you went in there, and were you an S corp the first time you went to sell it? Is that what it was,
We
or were
were
you
an
still?
LLC.
You were an LLC. So you're an LLC. You have about 20 people working for you. You're taking a salary, but it's just you're really you, Michael Cyger, and potentially partially your wife are the stars of the show. And if they sign the documents and you quit 2 years later and don't answer your phone, the business is going to turn to shit. That's
Right.
pretty much what you learned, right?
That's what
And
they're afraid of. And because we were taking money for the print magazine, which has a high cost, and we were treating it as cash on the accounting books. We were putting all the cash in our pockets, basically, right? And so they were
yeah,
worried, like when you take $40 for a subscription and you only deliver one magazine, you actually have a debt that needs to be serviced to deliver those magazines. And they didn't want to take on the debt without getting the revenue that we had already received. So we basically needed to shift the books to accrual. So we only recognize the revenue as we deliver an issue of the magazine, and the rest stays, with the business. Totally understandable. I was just a rookie in business. This is my first
yeah,
business that I've ever started. And,
yep.
those aren't the kinds of things that you can discuss with my peers who really weren't my peers at American Business Media, because they have entire accounting groups. They've been operating their
Yeah,
businesses for
it's
100
kind of
years.
embarrassing too.
Yeah,
It's kind of embarrassing, right? But
totally embarrassing. Yeah,
it's a mistake that you'll never make again, right? And
that is true.
did they honestly tell you that, as like, we decided your books are a mess, or not in that many words, but like it's just not going to work? Or did they just kind of say, we've decided to go another direction, and you kind of figured it out on your own?
Yeah, probably in the middle. They've decided to
In the
go a
middle.
different direction. Uh, I don't think that they were that blunt. And to be honest with you, it was such a negative time. I probably blocked it from my memory exactly what they said.
Yeah, I mean, from a much smaller level in my situation in my career and working with other salespeople, is at like the beginning of the month, you might have all these deals lined up, and you're counting the money, and you're going to make all this money this month, and then by the end of the month, you don't make shit, and it's just the whole month falls apart, and you're spending all your time trying to make those deals happen and bring them in. You're not focusing on new stuff, so then not only is this month bad, but the next month's bad, and you're depressed, and like you're desperate to bring in the deals or bring them back, and you don't want to let them go even though they're not materializing. So yeah, it's tough, and
Yeah.
and it's also allows you to do some soul searching and looking yourself in the mirror, and so anyway, so you end up, little foreshadowing here, but that deal blew up. Now you have a new suitor who's interested in purchasing the same business.
Yep.
From then until, so then you do a good deal. Did you get a better price than you did from the first place?
That is a good question. I can't remember. It was probably about the same price.
Okay,
I don't remember it
so you
being
have
lower
similar
or higher.
terms that you're happy with, and
Yep, they
then
were
part of
similar
that.
terms. I think that I can't remember it. The purchase price was probably about the same, but now we had an earnout. So they wanted to make sure that which is smart, whatever they buy, they want to ensure that I'm motivated to help them be successful. And so while I wasn't an employee, I was a contractor to them, not getting paid. And there was an earnout such that if we grew the revenue of the business by a certain amount, we would get a significant additional payout. So there was a 1 year earnout, and then there was a year 2 earnout. Little did I know that right when I sold the company, we were starting the global financial crisis, right? That was the time when the markets were changing. We just didn't know it at that time.
Was this
When
before? Was this before or after the bank started to fail, or was it like
Before.
right before it? Like,
This was before it. Yeah.
okay,
And I'll tell you why. Because they paid us the purchase price. Then I worked my butt off for the first year as a contractor, helping, the whole staff run the business, grow the business, which is really awkward when you're not the CEO anymore. Working with people who now have a different CEO creates for some very awkward discussions and conversations and times.
yeah,
But I was able to focus in on conferences. We secured the Department of Defense as a major conference that we would support. So we put together the program, we organized the venue, we brought in the sponsors, we worked with all of the armed forces to get them involved, presenting. It was a fantastic event. We were compensated very well. I was the main face person since most people knew me in the industry. And we ended up hitting our target for the year by the date that we had. Again, tons of turmoil, because if you hit, 1% less than the goal, and you'll know this as a salesperson, if you hit 1% less than the goal, you don't get that goal. You get the next rung down.
Nope.
Yeah. And
That's
so
the way it
there were
is.
knots in my stomach leading up to this year timeline. Were we going to be able to book, write a contract and book that revenue or not? It was gut wrenching, but in the end, we ended up hitting that target. Now, because of the global financial crisis, some of the biggest financial players in the industry ended up going into, having financial turmoil. One of which was Wells Fargo. You probably remember they rolled up all of those home loans, many of which were not worth investing in. They packaged them together, sold them out. They were one of the worst perpetrators of, a lot of the problems that caused the global financial crisis. It turns out that the company that bought my company had a line of credit with Wells Fargo. They had a $35 million line of credit. And you need it when you're a large company rolling up other companies to form a larger media company. They bought us, they paid us our money for the purchase price. They were going to use the line of credit to pay us the earnout. They were servicing all of the debt of their loan. They were paying Wells Fargo back everything that was due when it was due. But because Wells Fargo took such a beating in the global financial crisis, they basically said, whatever we're doing in financial services, that's not our core competency, we're not going to do anymore. So Wells Fargo went to the company that acquired us and said, you need to go find a line of credit at a different company that services media, because we're not going to do this anymore. And of course, nobody was doing any media lending at that time in the global financial crisis. This is, everything's going belly up at this time. So it was unfortunate. They ended up having to go into bankruptcy proceedings to restructure, and then, try and figure out their way forward.
Wow. So I used to sell into the government a little bit, and I'll tell you what, it is their purchase process and the amount of time it takes them to make a decision and for them to pay is painful. Yeah. So to organize, usually a conference is a very fluid, like a lot of questions, a lot of commitment. You're in a situation, if you're going to book a hotel, you got to get a deal with the hotel and probably make a deposit. Yeah. How do you have something with the Department of Defense that usually takes years to make a decision? How do you push that through? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I had a fantastic contact at the Pentagon that knew how to get things done. Okay. All completely legal, but he knew we're not going to be able to get I-Six Sigma as a approved vendor of the Department of Defense in time. So what you're going to do is, I've got this other consulting company I work with, and you're going to work with them to deliver the conference. I'm like, that's good with me. They're an approved vendor. Okay. We did not book hotels because it's the Department of Defense. They have a lot of locations. So the very first conference that we did for them, I think, was 300 people. I was able to book a venue that the DoD owned already, and we just booked the conference facility. For the next year, we grew it to 700 people or 800 people. And so we just found a larger facility that accommodated those people. And because everybody's from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and support, Secret Service support organizations, it didn't need to be fancy, right? These people didn't have anything fancy. Yeah. So we made it fancy in these environments where they were used to, and they had a great time. So, part of it is just figuring out, I like constraints in life, because then it allows you to know where the pins are set and then figure out how best to serve it given the constraints you have. And so it worked out well. They were very enjoyable conferences. And I think that we did some things that were a little different than the Department of Defense has done in the past, and it worked out well.
That's good. Well, they came back. And then
Yeah.
you mentioned a situation with the IRS, and it's a positive one. It's not a letter in the mail. What happened there?
Oh my gosh. So there's so many, I'm sure you'll experience this with many of your guests on this show. There's so many individual instances where new business owners are just completely caught flat-footed. They don't know how to respond. I remember the very first time I got a cease and desist letter for our business. That scared my wife to death. Like, she still thinks about that and still gets a gut in her stomach.
Yeah.
I remember that I was in Miami, Florida for a Six Sigma conference put on by another company. And we're a small company. The main line rolls over to my cell phone. And I had walked outside to make a phone call, and I looked at my voicemail, and it said Internal Revenue Service. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is the end of my business. They're going to do an audit. I don't even know like how we're going to get through this. I think I'm doing everything right, but who knows, And so I listened to the voicemail. It says, hi, this is so-and-so from the Internal Revenue Service. I have a question for you. Can you please call me back at this number, extension this? I'm like, the butterflies are moving in my stomach. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm just going to call her back. So I dial the phone number. It rings. She's like, hi, this is so-and-so with the Internal Revenue Service. And I said, hi, this is Michael Cyger. You called my business, isixsigma.com. Do you have a question that I can answer for you? She's like, oh, yes. Thank you so much for calling me back. I'm with the Internal Revenue Service. We want to post a job on your website, but we can't pay by credit card. Can you send us an invoice? And I said, hell yeah, I can send you an invoice.
That's great.
That's sending the IRS an invoice that they needed to pay me was one of the complete joys of my life.
Did you tell them there'd be some big interest if they didn't pay it on time? Threatening notes on that?
I did not. I was very fortunate running Six Sigma. In this B2B space, I very infrequently had bad debt. Everybody paid their invoices within 30 days. I never had to call anybody to try and get them to pay. It was such a joy that I've later realized in my life is not normal.
I think the thing is, like, from my point of view, if money gets tight, you got to focus on the things that you got to pay the vendors that give you the value, and that you're not going to be late or take the chance you're going to lose them. But then the fringe ones that might not be as important, maybe we'll skip this month, or you'll see what happens. Kind of can get to that way by priority. So with that company, you sold it to the media company that lost their line of credit. They went bankrupt. They still owed you money. You hit your numbers that you're supposed to hit. You did everything you're supposed to do, but putting in the effort, even in a tough economy, you still grew the business, did everything you're supposed to do. They didn't pay you. So you had to renegotiate the terms in the bankruptcy, right?
Yeah. Well, so yes, So people were calling me and they're like, hey, Mike, Six Sigma is down. And I'd be like, hey, I sold that like 3 years ago. I have nothing to do with it nowadays.
You're saying the website was down. The website did not resolve.
Goes down because they're not paying their hosting bills, Jeff.
Oh my God,
I got calls from staff because they had let them go. And they were furloughing them to start with. They're like, oh, it's just going to be a month until we get our new financing, which they couldn't get. And then a month turned into 2 months and 3 months. And suddenly, my staff just needed to go get jobs. They got bills to pay and mortgages to pay. And so everybody left. They had no staff. They weren't paying their hosting bills. Nobody was moderating anything on the website. They weren't publishing new content. And that's sort of the lifeblood of a media organization. So they ended up calling me 6 months later. The gentleman who I should mention, they did end up paying the earnout, the first year earnout, right?
Mhm.
They had private equity from a well-known private equity company in the US. I agreed not to drive their business into bankruptcy by filing a lawsuit to try and get paid the earnout. The private equity company took off a percentage, a large percentage for themselves and guaranteed it, but made us wait another 6 months. So, my wife and I, our stomachs again are in turmoil. Is this guarantee good? Are we going to need to take the private equity company to court in order to get paid? It's a significant amount of money in this earnout that we worked really hard for. And so, anyways, they ended up paying that. I'm done with the whole company. I'm just such a negative, bad taste in my mouth from them. Then I get a call 6 months later saying, "Hey, we're actually going to go into bankruptcy and restructure. All of your iSixSigma.com assets are distressed now. Do you want to buy them back?" and
Could
I
you
said,
believe it?
I'm like, it hasn't been operational for like months now. What do you expect me to do with it? But it was my baby. I didn't want to see it die. On the vine. I knew the content. I knew the structure. I had originally built the whole content management system before, WordPress even existed. They had migrated the year prior to Joomla, a content management system, which I was a little familiar with. And I'm like,
Which is still around.
yeah, it's still around. I talked about it with my wife. We ended up, well, let's try and buy it back. Let's close down the print magazine because it's a lot of work. Let's close down the recruiting business. Let's close down the conference business, and let's just run it like a lifestyle business. I still have all the connections. It still served a lot of people, had high authority in the search engines, been around since 2000. And so we ended up making a really, really low offer for it, pennies on the dollar. And they agreed to it because nobody else wanted to buy the distressed assets. So
you ended up back with it.
So we ended up getting it back, closed down all the stuff that was a lot of work. We had one employee going forward, and then a small cadre of consultants or contractors that would write content and do research and create graphics for us. And we migrated everything from Joomla to WordPress. This was 2011, I think, somewhere around there, 2010, 2011. And then we relaunched it. And it was just a scaled down version of what it used to be. Then traffic started growing back up because it was, down at zero. But there was so many links, out on the internet, and Google said, "Hey, it's back up and running," and started giving us, links in the search engine rankings again. And so we ran that for a number of years. Brought back a lot of advertisers that we used to have. The market has changed significantly since the first time that we owned it. E-learning was, the second time we owned it was major. There was no social media. There was no e-learning back in the original time. Now we thought about starting our own e-learning, but at this point we're, semi-retired. I really didn't want to work that hard. And so we ran it for a number of years, and then we decided it's time to sell it again. We're just not as excited about the topic as we used to be. And so we hired another broker and put it up on the market, got a number of interested parties, and moved through and sold it. So now the company that owns it specializes in online content. They're not Six Sigma operational excellence professionals, but they really understand how to run online businesses. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they continue to evolve iSix Sigma going forward.
Do they call you ever?
No.
Not at all. Not to ask a question. Would you be excited?
The first year or two, they sent emails. They did. And I would clarify, the relationship that we had with a certain company versus another, or, how we did things. But they died off pretty quickly. They are fully competent business people that have, that work at large companies, understand online publishing, understand B2B media. This isn't their full-time gig. They're just two best friends that wanted to work on a project together, and they saw the authority and the links and the content that Six Sigma had built over, 20 years. And they're like, this is a gem that we can't pass up. So they wanted to buy it.
Okay. And so so the first time you sold it, you got into a little bit of angel investing and you started to starting to speak to a lot of different entrepreneurs or businesses or whatever. They're looking for funds. And then you said you looked at their domain names and it just seemed like they all were pretty bad.
They were terrible. They were horrendous. Like, they had a good concept, but just the domain name, the name that they gave their company, like just left such a bad taste in my mouth that like I couldn't get past it. I'm like, if you can't even make a decision about like a decent domain name, I know you don't have any money, but like a decent domain name, how am I going to be sure that you're going to spend my angel money in a proper way?
Well, in 2010, I'd say most companies still worked together under a roof and they had a copy machine and a fax machine still and things like that. And it's always interesting that a company would spend more money on the copy machine or a water bucket, the water cooler than the domain name, it's strange, and I was laughing with a guy. I play golf every week in a league and this guy's a plumber and he's saying he's retiring. His son's taking over, and he was talking to me about the internet. And I said, yeah, no more A plumbing to get to the top of the yellow pages anymore. He's like, yeah, no shit. Those days are gone. We had a good chuckle about it. And it's like, you need a good, domain to be competitive in your space. And you're right. Like, especially I'm guessing the niche that you were in are more like technology, kind of tech types of people. It's not, you're not investing in a landscaping business or something like that. And
100%,
and those people
they were all tech. Yeah.
So these people came to you, they said, hey, I got a good idea. You agree. They got a decent business plan, an okay group of people that they're working with. And then the domain is horrid. So when you saw that, did you start looking for domains for them when you invested in their business? And is that how it got you into the domain industry to see that the buying and selling was going on? Or did you know about that kind of previously?
I didn't know anything about the domain name industry. And when I would ask them, why is your domain name so terrible? Why do you have the number 2 instead of TO or whatever in your domain name? People are going to get confused. They're like, well, we tried to buy the domain name, but somebody wouldn't respond, or they quoted some, exorbitantly high number, or we just don't know how much we should pay. So we're just focused on the technology, building the company, and we're not focused on the branding, which I totally get, right? We've all started companies, and you started a brokerage company. You got to pick a domain name. I'm sure you agonized over that for months trying to figure out what's available, at what price, what do I have to trade off for it? It's hard. And so I didn't really have any answers for them when they would ask me some questions, when I would ask them questions, and then they would have these problems. And so I decided, I'm an engineer. I like to reverse engineer things and figure out how they work. And so I said, give me a few weeks. I'm going to figure out how the domain name industry works, and I'll help you get a better domain name. Right? It was like, why not? I'm naive. I don't know anything about the domain name industry. So that brought me down a decade plus journey that has been very enjoyable in the domain name industry, trying to figure out how it all works.
So in between that, though, you mentioned that you started an app. You're building applications for people, apps, because the smartphone came out right around 2010, right?
Yes.
9, 10. So you're building apps. So were you building apps and finding those were more important than domain names? Were you more into that first, then got into domains? Is that?
I think I might have started building apps before I started doing angel investing, because, the AI of today, the blockchain of yesterday was the App Store in 2010, right? Yeah, everything was going to be apps. You probably don't need a website. You're just going to download an app. It's going to be, task specific. And, I was drinking from the water cooler. I thought like it could be that right. And so I decided to sign up for a 1-week boot camp, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., nothing but learning how to build apps. specifically for iOS. And I think I flew someplace to do this, and it was very exciting. And so I started learning how to build apps. I built an app for a law firm in Seattle that wanted, they had drank from the same water cooler and like, we must have an app. So I built an app for their law firm. And then I started, figuring out, my core competency, what I've learned after decades of running my own business is that I'm very good with content. I know what good content is. I know generally how to deliver good content, and I'm very good at executing day after day after day, even when it's really boring to do so. And there's other things that you should do, in your life that you want to do. And so I said, well, I'm going to build a scalable app company that has content supplied by subject matter experts, and it's going to have quizzes and content, and it'll be fun and have pictures and sounds, and they do all the content, I do all the tech, and I, just like a book publisher delivers royalties to the authors, I was going to do that in the app environment. I built about 30 apps, got them in the App Store, and after about a year of doing that, I realized, like, I don't want to really be in the app business. Apple, when somebody owns the entire infrastructure, you're beholden to them. We saw this on Facebook when companies gave up their websites and moved to Facebook with the promises that if a customer likes your page, you will be able to communicate with them. That went away. Certain rules on the App Store changed over time. And it just, it clarified in my mind that if I'm going to build an ecosystem, I want to own the ecosystem. I can own that with my own website. And so I decided to close down that business and move on and do some angel investing and see what else I wanted to work on.
So you found, you started doing Domain Sherpa, so you could learn more about the industry yourself, and so you could interview people from the industry, and they weren't really receptive of you at first, right?
Yeah.
But when I met you, Domain Sherpa, so I got in the industry in 2010. And so, 2010. So when I met you, Domain Sherpa was relatively well known at that point, and you, or at least I thought you were well known. And I even still have the mug from when you
interviewed
on the show. I drink out of it. I wish I had it with me right now. It's in my kitchen. But yeah, so the beginning was tough to get into. And what did you do to really, like, you were telling me before the call, our conversation here, that you were trying to get interviews with some of the leaders in the industry, and they're like, who the hell are you? Leave me alone.
Yeah.
What did you do to earn their respect and their trust, and to see that, like, you are legitimate and you're not doing some expose or something?
Yeah. So the business model that I had for Domain Sherpa when I started was completely different from what it is, what it was during the majority of my ownership and what it is today. I originally had my professional writers that I had at I6 Sigma that had written for Forbes and Venture and other, magazines. I wanted to bring them into the domain name space. I wanted to have them write professional articles, do professional photography, and have like a real magazine. But when I put a real print magazine potentially, but when I put these authors in, pointed them in the direction of certain people that I wanted to interview, gave them the topics, gave them the people and an email address, they would reach out, and these people wrote back and said, I don't know you. I don't know this Mike Cyger guy, and I don't trust you, and I'm not going to give you my time. And I'm like, this is before, DN Journal was clearly around. I'm not sure if Domain Name Wire. Yeah, I think Andrew Alleman started Domain Name Wire before that. But there wasn't a ton. Nobody knew me. They didn't know my prior life as a publisher in the business-to-business space. So it's completely understandable. And I'm like, okay, this model of me assigning a professional writer and getting a photographer in the city that these people live in to go shoot isn't going to work. I'm going to need to do something different. And Andrew Warner over at Mixergy.com is my, my interviewing god. He I've listened to so many of his interviews that I feel like I could recite them by memory. I like the way that he asked tough questions. I like the way that he structured his interviews with, here's the success. Now let's talk about the entrepreneur's journey, the low points, the high points, the much like what you're doing. And so I emailed Andrew. I'm like, hey, Andrew, I love what you do. I want to do Mixergy, but I want to do it in the domain name space. Would you mind if I, followed your lead? And he's like, I would love that. Please do. And he gave me some tips. Here's how I do videos. Here's how I record, all that sort of stuff. And I went off on that journey. Now, to your question, it's really difficult to get people to come on the show when they're not sure what they're going to get, right? Am I going to be portrayed well? Am I going to speak well? Is the interviewee going to make me look like a rock star, even though I'm not a rock star? I'm just a regular person, just like everybody else.
I think you have a very interesting story. That's why I'm asking, though. Like in your case.
So I think my very first interview, I'm like, you know what? I need somebody that is well known. I need somebody that would trust me, and somebody that's accessible. So I think my very first interview was Ron Jackson of DN Journal.
Oh, wow.
And then I think my very second interview was Andrew Alleman at Domain Name Wire. And so here are two media people. They understand media. I think I probably gave them some social proof from the past. I probably, sent them some information to make them comfortable. I don't remember how we recorded the videos back in 2010. There was no Zoom or anything back then. Anyways, got through, those little hurdles, recorded the videos. And I think once I got past the first 2 or 3 interviews and published them, then people are like, oh, these are good. These are not what we've seen in the past. I want to be on that show too. And so it was always, our industry is very small. The domain name industry is very small. So there's only so many people you can interview per year. And my goal was to do an interview per week. And so I started down that path to meet people in the domain name industry, because even though it's so small, as your network's probably, multiple times the size of mine, there are tons of very successful people out doing domain name investing, either full-time, part-time, that have things to share. It's just, you need to convince them to come on your show. And so, and then coupled that with entrepreneurs. And that's really the love of my life, is building things and also talking to people who are building their companies. Like, I love that, the highs and lows. And so I would bring on Noah Kagan, who spent $1 million buying sumo.com, or bring on Jamie Siminoff, who bought ring.com and then later sold it to Amazon for $1 billion, trying to find those people that really get domain names and are true entrepreneurs, so that we can continue to, share the knowledge about how a domain name can help your perception and help your customers find a new business with you.
Absolutely. If you're going to do Domain Name Sherpa again, what would be the advice you'd give yourself?
If I were to do Domain Sherpa again,
you started all over again today. You just said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I loved it so much.
Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got for Domain Sherpa, and I'm not even sure, I think I might have mentioned this to him. I went to my very first conference, domain name conference. It was probably traffic. I saw Elliot Silver from Elliot's blog, now Domain Investing. And I asked him, like, what piece of advice would you give me? And the piece of advice he said made all the difference in getting Domain Sherpa off the ground. He said, and I'll genericize it after it. He said, make sure you get your feed on domaining.com. That's what he said. Distribution for media is critical. You could have the best content in the world, but if you don't do any marketing, if you don't have distribution for that content, it's like a tree falling in the woods. So you really need to understand good content, and then you also need to have a distribution plan. Later in Domain Sherpa, I would not only have it in the feed, but I contacted Francois Carrillo, who owns domaining.com and has been a great partner for for years of Domain Sherpa, I would buy a package of promoted headlines on domaining.com so that every time I put out a show, I would highlight it at the top of Domaining for a day. So the most amount of people possible would see it there.
Mm-hmm.
Today that might mean going where people are. It might mean buying Twitter ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, as the case may be. I think the company that's doing it the best today is Squad Help. Darpan is everywhere. Like whatever social media you go on, you're going to see a Squad Help ad or a domain ad for domains at Squad Help. So, distribution is critical, and dialing in the distribution channels that are appropriate for what you're offering is really important to figure out.
Absolutely. Good. Awesome. So you ended up selling Domain Sherpa.
Yep.
In 2017.
Yep. Drew Rosner.
But before you sold Domain Sherpa, you started DN Academy, which is 2015, 14?
2015. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember when I was in Cayman, you approached me at one of the conferences in Vegas and you're like, hey, I've been working on this. It hasn't come out yet. Can you look it over? And then I looked it over and I thought it was great. I thought you did a really good job covering all the basics. And then I used it when we were building our sales team to create that basis. And then we made a deal where you customized it for us. So it also had extra parts in it for the way that we did sales. And that was like, a pretty, that was a really valuable tool for us that really standardized, training. And I think when I first got in the business, I was just handed like a printout of all this like copy and pasted shit saying, here you go. It wasn't really standardized, and it just, they're doing the best they could. But I think that really helped us as a company. And when I was putting things together and trying to take certain articles and saying, go read articles by this guy, here's a good article here, here's a good website here, I thought that was really good. But as I went on it and did more trainings with the guys, I would notice that you were constantly improving it. And you were constantly adding more and more content or changing the content and going over it over and over and over and over again. And I was always curious because then I know you called me at one point before I left. I think it was probably 6 or 8 months before I left. You asked me, would you guys be interested in buying it and then bring me on to help with marketing? And we talked about it, and we just didn't have the community of people that we felt that we could get the return. And I think it obviously worked out for the best for you to sell it to GoDaddy and then work with their tens of thousands of customers or hundreds of thousands of customers and get that implemented. I haven't looked at it since it's been on GoDaddy. Are you still on all the videos and things like that? And do you know how many people have taken the course?
I am still on all the videos because it was my content. Most of the examples are, many of the examples are mine. I was the one that did the integration into GoDaddy. So for those not familiar, I sold DN Academy to GoDaddy. We closed in early 2022 in January. And then I spent the next 10 or 11 months integrating it in. So we basically, instead of using the content management system that I had built in WordPress, we integrated into Salesforce. So not only could they productize it and roll it out in, different products that they're offering, they could also use it for internal training of their employees, product managers, brokers, SDR reps, but then they could also offer it to customers like we were doing beforehand. And then it also allowed us to, customize it in certain ways. And so you reminded me of a couple of stories here, Jeff. I did forget that you were my very first corporate customer of DN Academy, and I am very grateful
really?
to you for that. Yeah, you were the first. You build a product, and you're not sure if there's going to be product market fit or not. And the domain name industry is so small. I went to the very first NamesCon event. I'm sorry, not the very first one. I went to one, and it was probably 2015. I probably started writing the content in 2014. In 2015, I went to NamesCon in January, and I'm like, hey, I've got this shiny new object. Let me tell you about what I'm doing. And I think I showed it to you, and I showed it to some other people. And, generally people are nice. So they're like, yeah, this is great. But you never know if they're going to pay money for it or not. You have the vision to see, hey, this is good. It might be better you gave me critical information that you wanted inside the course. I asked you, do you want this? Can I share this? Because, your knowledge was so much broader and deeper than mine at that time. I said, would you mind if I share this, or do you want to keep this as private information to Uniregistry? And so you define that. And then you also had the vision to see, hey, Mike, can you, this is great. This is great for bringing on new brokers. But we also have this phone system that we need to train people on. And we also have this, escrow process that's unique to Uniregistry that we need to train people on. Can you include that and only allow it access to Uniregistry employees? And I'm like, I think I could build that based on, the email address. Nobody is going to have an email address unless they prove it. And so we built that. We probably charged you some very nominal amount because I wanted to offer that as a service to somebody else as well. And so you're basically helping us prove this concept, and having, you and Frank Schilling and Uniregistry as, social proof was really big. So then we later brought on, escrow.com employees. We brought on GoDaddy employees that we had for a number of years, NamesCon employees who wanted to better understand, and a couple of other, there was another escrow company that stopped doing escrows. Anyways, a number of corporate companies that wanted to train multiple companies. So I'm very appreciative to you that you brought up the story, reminded me, because my memory is so bad. But that was critical for just social proof. If the number, if arguably one of the top brokerages in the industry is using your training program, that says something. So I was grateful for that.
Yeah, but then, GoDaddy bought it, which obviously put the cherry on top as the biggest player in the industry, using it and then implementing it, and not just buying it and shutting it down, right? Because there's always that possibility when you sell something to a company that size, right?
Well, and a lot of people are negative on GoDaddy because they're buying up everything and things change. People don't like to be changed, right? You list your domain names in a certain marketplace like Dan, and suddenly things start to change, and they always attribute it to whatever at corporate bureaucracy at GoDaddy. But having been inside the company for a year, and I left after my first year anniversary, short story. But having been in the company for a year, having worked with the leadership and the people in the trenches doing the work every day, I can say without a doubt, they want to do the right thing. It's hard for large companies to innovate. Dan was a technology that allowed them to, quickly innovate on a process that they can then reproduce inside. I don't know what the future holds for Dan. I was very particular about what I wanted DN Academy to become inside of GoDaddy. We hopefully set it up for success in the future by enabling modules that allow both employees and customers to get the education that they need at the point that they need it. So if somebody's just going to auctions, we can deliver them content that's just related to auctions and buying good domain names and auctions without having to go through the whole course. So, and they also just did a phenomenal job supersizing our technology. We built a whole host of tools, valuation worksheets, a lot of which, I worked with you over the years to help perfect and improve. And they, did a great job enabling these technologies to scale for, the millions of customers that they have that might want to use them someday. So, I was very happy with the way that they implemented it. I feel comfortable with them being the stewards of now Domain Academy. And it's one of the fantastic things. Many people know Joe Styler in the industry because he's been at GoDaddy for so many years. He is moving on from GoDaddy Auctions. He's run that for a number of years, and he's going to be taking over Domain Academy. So I'm very excited to continue.
Oh, is he really? Oh,
somebody is listening to this show who is an individual investor as well, taking over and running Domain Academy.
He's a smart guy too. He definitely knows his stuff, and he's definitely somebody that'll, I think, make it better, without a doubt.
Yes.
I think when it comes to, for me, in my perspective, is working at, it was internet traffic / domain name sales when I started, and there was 4 of us really on the sales team to bring it to 50 people and build the domain name sales platform and integrating that into Uniregistry and making that happen. And then I left, and GoDaddy buys the business. And then it was kind of like watching a majestic ship slip beneath the waves when they shut it down. I mean, I was sad about it, but it doesn't really make sense for a company like GoDaddy to keep domain name sales, Uniregistry, Dan, Afternic, and themselves on their own GoDaddy platform, plus I guess other things I don't even know exist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there needs to be a standardization. What the part that I didn't understand was they came out and said we bought Dan because they had for payment plans and their payment plan technology. I think we had about 500 payment plans going in a whole system that we could offer payment plans at Uniregistry. So that kind of left me scratching my head when I heard that, because I was like, what are you talking about? Ours is years older and more advanced, but obviously that hit a little bit of a nerve with me. But it is, it was sad to see domain name sales and Uniregistry go, but it does make sense. And you're right, people don't like change, but at the same time, if GoDaddy is going to support all those things, then you're going to have, you're going to have a sales manager that runs that department, a sales manager that runs this. You have developing teams that work on each of those different ways of supporting it, maintaining them, security breaches, systems all behind that all have to come together and work. Right. When you have multiple products, somebody calls one of your salespeople and they tell the seller something and he's like, it says something different on Dan. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, well, there's walls that need to be broken down. And it's like, if you do all that to make people happy, you'll probably, the amount of time you've wasted doing it and the amount of money you waste and the amount of resources, the price that you would have to charge for that would chase everybody away anyway. Like, it just doesn't, you just got to move on from it, take the best you can and keep going. Right.
I will say that, I think the Dan.com automation for domain transfer was better than the Uniregistry one.
Without a doubt.
And I will say that the Uniregistry user interface was revolutionary. And I believe that the GoDaddy, it's hard for many people to see it, but I worked so closely with you because Uniregistry was the first registrar that we recommended and gave benefits to DN Academy members at the time, because you and I formed that relationship. I brought new customers to you. You gave a benefit to them of lower prices or what have you. I now see a lot of the user interface benefits that you had at Uniregistry at GoDaddy. A lot of people can't see that because they just don't know what Uniregistry used to be. I do know that the product manager that you had at Uniregistry has continued to do a phenomenal job at GoDaddy and continues to work there. And I'm so, glad that GoDaddy won't let him leave. They should really shackle him as much as they can with.
You talking about Bart?
Yeah.
Bart's a good guy. Yeah.
And the engineers that came over as well. And so, I think it's hard for people to see. And I think it's easy for people to disparage GoDaddy for buying companies, but there's definitely some transfer of intellectual property happening.
Useful, absolutely. And I mean, it makes sense to their plans and their goals.
Yeah.
So what is the great Mr. Cyger now that you've walked away from all of these things? You're done with Domain Sherpa. You're a special guest every once in a while. I guess that's the one of the few that still calls you. And, you're done. You're done with that. You're done with DN Academy. You've done your time with GoDaddy and have left in obviously a very positive way. What are you doing now? What's taking up your time?
Yeah. So I've been playing with a few different things. People on social media, on Twitter specifically, might have seen that I developed a website called insider.email that allows you to build a newsletter really quickly out of your tweets that you posted on Twitter. But much like what I learned about with NoPro apps and building in the iOS marketplace back in 2010, I got a lesson update by trying to build in conjunction with Elon Musk's Twitter, now X platform. So some fits and starts on that. I do use it to send out my own newsletter at cygersays.com. and it is a great productivity tool, but I'm not sure that I want to focus more time on that. I have started a new project as of July. It's a really big project. It's a big aspirational project. I brought on a co-founder. Their name is OpenAI, and they are
Okay,
helping to
wow.
write all of the code for my new project. It is, Jeff, it is phenomenal. If I'm not a programmer, but I do play one on TV, and I know enough about databases, about languages, about frameworks, and about storage to try and to give OpenAI, ChatGPT, enough information that it can supply me back with the code that I need to use. And it is remarkable what I'm able to build in a couple of months by myself. I'm still in touch with my chief technology officer, Deepak Mittal, who works at GoDaddy. I brought him on with GoDaddy, and we worked on some projects together. Um, and I show him what I'm building, and he's like, "Wow, I can't believe that ChatGPT is like giving you the code to do that." And it's really about the prompts and really about getting access to this large language model that's read so much code in the past that it knows if you describe it well. You need some competence to be able to describe it, that it can write this code for you. And so then I'm a great integrator. I know what kind of environment I want. I'm not going to talk specifically about the project yet,
You
um,
don't have
but it's going really well. I'm enjoying it. Lots of people like to have their pastimes, like going golfing or building custom cabinetry, woodworking, or whatever. I like to just sit in front of my computer and code. I like to solve problems, figure out how the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle go together, and build things. And so I'm really excited about building this new project of mine. I'm probably going to work on it for the next number of years, and I think it could be game changing for a lot of people in corporate America. So I'll leave it at
How
that.
could you, when you equate the work that you're getting out of OpenAI for what the prompts you're giving and then what you're getting back, do you
Yeah.
equivalent that to a developer with 5 years experience, 10 years experience, one, two, three of them? What do you equate it to?
You know, I hire a lot of programmers on Upwork, and I'm really
Yep.
amazed at the level of coding experience that somebody with only 1 or 2 years of programming experience has. Sometimes I'm really amazed. Other times, I've worked with Deepak we've literally worked together for like 13, 14 years. And I know
Mhm.
that he's great. You need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. Is it a structural? Do you need to figure out the tech stack to use, how you want to store the data, how much data you're going to get? If you don't understand any of that, you need somebody with 10 years experience like a Deepak. But if you are working on one little module and you need AI to write this code that goes to get this information, then uses ChatGPT via API to put some tags on it, let's say, or rewrite some content, you can use somebody that has 1 or 2 years experience. So it's really, you need to figure out what the limitations are. So since leaving GoDaddy in March, I think, the first couple of months, I was just playing around with OpenAI, trying to understand those constraints that we talked about earlier. Understanding the constraints then gives me the ability to figure out how to work through them and how I can be creative in solving problems. And so now I'm actually understanding those constraints. I know when I need to go hire a programmer to do a portion of it, or if I can get ChatGPT to help me with it. And it's amazing things that it can do, like really sophisticated things like I need a table that can sort, that when I mouse over it highlights the cells and allows you to select multiple rows. It can write that code based on how well you describe it, and that's using HTML and CSS, and it'll write some scripting language, whether you're using Java or PHP or whatever, on the back end to help process it. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing and scary at the same time because what's going to happen to a very lucrative position that a lot of people are aspiring to do very soon, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I'm tend to be an optimist, and I tend to think that this is a productivity tool that's going to allow good programmers to become great programmers, or good programmers to put out code faster than they would beforehand. Um, yeah, I don't look at it as a negative.
I think that with someone who really knows their stuff and is really good at it and is driven, it would certainly be helping them to be a lot better without hesitation. But I think then there's a lot of wannabes that are going to use it for laziness,
Right.
and it's going to end up making it so they don't ever really get that pressure to really get better. And so there's going to be a lot of mediocrity or reliance on this as well, right? And I think
Yeah.
unfortunately that tends to be the majority a lot of the times in some
Yeah,
ways,
I
right?
think with any discontinuity in either technology or media or society, it shakes out within a year or two. Everybody's worried that like the world is going to be full of OpenAI generated content, and if you've read good content and then you've read OpenAI generated content, you see the difference. There's no original thought. There's no perspective that we follow
No.
people for. It's just regurgitation of information. Some topics are fine for regurgitation of information, but most content reads for people that are trained in content. It reads as content generated by AI, and people aren't going to be attracted to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll wash
So
out in a year or two.
I hear you. All right. So last thing before we go, I saw you come out with some pretty amazing news a couple days ago that Voice.com is shuttering its doors in the next few months. Voice sold for $30 million a few years ago, and really the peak, was it the peak crypto or was it peak in NFTs? I can't really remember. More like peak crypto at the time,
One of
right?
those two, yeah. And just to be
And
clear, that wasn't my news that I broke. They sent me an email and I just posted it on Twitter.
Well, it was broke to me. You broke it to me, so I'll
Okay.
call it that.
Okay.
But like I read the article or what you posted,
Yeah.
and I'm really kind of wasn't when I read it, I wasn't surprised, and I'll say for two reasons. The first is that at the time, I don't know who the buyer was. I don't know what kind of money he or she had or what the plans were, but I think spending, I bought saw.com myself long before I had any aspirations of leaving Uniregistry. It was just an opportunity that presented itself, and I said, "This is a cool name. I'll buy it." So I bought it, and then taking that name and then building my little business on it, and the amount of money that I had to invest in the website and SEO and articles and link building and the technology behind it and the CRM and marketing and going to shows and doing all these things. I don't disagree with someone who spends, obviously it's my livelihood. I don't disagree with someone who spends $1 million or $2 million or even, it depends. It's just proportional to what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
But I felt right out of the gate to spend $30 million. I mean, that just seemed to me as so exorbitant and almost careless.
Yeah.
The first step when you started a business. And if they came to me with the business plan as we bought voice.com for 30 million as part of that, I would say, I'm probably a pass, because that to me in and of itself just seems not like a very good idea. Now, obviously they started in the hole 30 million, so they get to sell their service significantly just to make that back. And at a 3% interest rate, you're going to what? A significant amount of money a year, $1 million in interest a
Yeah.
year at 3%.
Yeah. $1 million. Yep.
And then, now what about all the developers and all the work and everything that's going to go behind that? So you're going to be burning another $20 million, $30 million a year. Like, how long until the money runs out, and how are you going to make your money back? And then you can't think that crypto is going to keep going at the same speed. And then NFTs came out, and that was, again, another one of those things that it was like a match. It burned and then it kind of faded. And we've seen our trends since we've been in the industry. So of a lot of the startups that I've seen, this one is one of the least surprising to me that isn't going to make it. I don't know. I just felt like there's this careless decision there. What do you think?
I I think it's easy for us domain name investors who know what the market is like to sit back and armchair quarterback the play. We don't know how much. I don't know how much money they raised. They might have raised 300 million, and this is just a tenth of it. They could have had aspirations to build a $300 billion company, and this is just a drop in the bucket from their game plan. And maybe they had proof of concept that showed that they could actually hit that revenue target and things would work out. This could have been the next coming of, technology that revolutionized. Everybody's talking about AI right now. Back when this deal was done, crypto, blockchain was the AI.
Yeah, that was everything.
And so there was a lot of excitement. Couple that with the fact that Michael Saylor was the seller who never wants to sell any of his domain names. They had to have it. He wasn't going to sell it unless he got a $30 million payday. It was the perfect storm for an all-cash deal that leads the top sellers chart. But I don't know any of the details around voice.com. I'm sure they had, I don't know. It could have been a pets.com or it could have been an amazon.com. Don't you wish you invested in Amazon Books when it used to be, just the books reseller when they started off?
And they had the auctions. Remember the auctions? Yeah.
Yeah. So look Absolutely. At them now. Like, there's nothing to say that they couldn't have been in Amazon and they turned out to be at pets.com. So I try not to, you've run a business. I've run a business. We know how hard it is. We know that decisions every day add up to either make you a success or a failure in business. And we're just trying to make the best decisions we can with the limited information that we have at the time, and hope for the best. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Not every entrepreneur is going to be successful in their journey. So I try not to throw too much shade on the people that bought voice.com. I also think that it's a phenomenal asset that can probably resell in the $5 to $10 million range relatively easily. They might have to wait a few years for us to come out of this recession, but it's, definitely a strong domain name. 3 million, 5 million, somewhere in that order of magnitude.
I guess now that the more that you've positioned it to me, the more I've been thinking about it while you were talking is like in the media business, $30 million on an advertising campaign really isn't a whole ton of money anyway, is it?
And I didn't even talk about that. Like, did they get $30 million worth of earned media credit from buying that domain name? I don't know about 30 million, but they definitely got a few million.
They got a few million, but when you look at an advertising campaign in general, that could be worldwide or nationwide. I mean, 30 million isn't an immense amount of money compared to, say, if they had the aspirations to be a Coca-Cola or an Amazon or one of these places. They could spend that in a month, right? So it's not outside of the norm of reality.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that covers the life and times of Michael Cyger. And we'll have to check back in a few months when you launch your new product. When do you think it's going to be ready to go?
I don't think I'm going to launch it for a year from when I started. So we'll touch base in July of 2024 and see if it's ready to launch.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time today. I greatly appreciate it. It's been you have a really interesting story here to build a company and sell it twice. Well, 2.5 times, I'd say. And build 2 products that are really well known in the business that are used by many to learn and become better investors and better business people within our industry. And now moving on to something new and exciting. So I'm sure it'll be great as well. So thanks, Mike. It's been great. And
thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I've really appreciated this. You brought back memories that I haven't thought about in a while. And I appreciate the fact that I can record this and maybe share it with my kids that someday will be interested in watching it. So thank you for that. And I will be at the ICA, Internet Commerce Association member meeting in January in Vegas. So I hope to see you there.
And I'll be there with you. Definitely. Without a doubt. It's on the schedule. Can't wait to go and see everybody. I think this will be a good show.
Yeah.
We might have to go and do a ceremony, a memorial at the Tropicana. I think it'll be leveled by then.
That's right. They are talking about that. Yeah, well, pilgrimage back to the Tropicana because we've spent so many years there through Names Gone.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
great. Well, thanks for coming.